Hello there, viewer or listener. This is Mike from the podcast that you are about to listen to. I just wanted to take a little while to address a couple of things before we start this episode. First of all, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the ongoing SAG-AFTRA and Writers Guild strikes. It's been up in the air a little bit as to what's been going on, but I have done some due diligence and research. First of all, it's worth pointing out that myself, my co-host DK, and none of the people who are guests on the podcast are members of any of these organizations, so they wouldn't be considered as being, breaking any of the rules of the organization since they're not a member. But we did want to show our support, so I did want to double check and see what the rules are regarding things here, since I know that members and certain other groups are not allowed to promote struck work, or are certainly not being encouraged to do that. And I did not want to break any of those rules or break any of that sort of good faith with those organizations. I've double checked. I will leave a link possibly to this article in the description, but I've checked the FAQs from SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild as referenced on Variety, the trade website. They are basically happy to confirm that critics are not on strike and not obligated to stop reviewing movies and TV shows, which I think, I mean, I'm under no illusions that we are professional critics, but that is what we're doing here. We're not so much promoting these works as engaging in criticism of them. Hopefully, at least that's how people see it. Likewise, if it says if you want to still do a podcast, the only restrictions are the ones that apply to any medium, which means that SAG-AFTRA members are not allowed to promote struck work. Otherwise, you can podcast away. So, yeah, I mean, you'll probably not be hearing any interviews on the podcasts with SAG-AFTRA members, certainly not any promotion of current or upcoming work. We probably won't be doing that anyway. As I said, it should not be considered that we are doing promotion, because we're not. We are basically just, this is independent criticism, essentially, of those things. But having said that, I do want to make it clear that we are in full support of both guilds. In this particular strike, it's not really fair what's been going on. So I did look up as well what we can potentially do to help with these things, and what we can say going forward, to be supportive. So if you just bear with me, I have some information here. It just says, you can donate to the Entertainment Community Fund, which is supporting crew members who are out of work. Of course, there are other people besides writers, directors, and such who are not able to work because work is stopped at the moment. So they are people who need our help as well. The unions also encourage non-members that they can show up at picket lines and at rallies. I suspect that really only applies to those who are in the US. But if you are, as I said, if you follow that link that I will leave in the description, you can also find lists of picket locations and such. And that help, I think, will be greatly appreciated. Basically, all I can say to that now is, I'm very much aware that the works that we are looking at wouldn't exist without the labour of the writers and actors that are currently on strike, and the work being covered here. The people that do it deserve fair treatment and compensation against a system that is not fair at the moment, and it's hugely problematic. And I did just want to emphasize, we are not supporting studios during the strike by doing this, and we encourage none of our viewers / listeners to do the same thing. This podcast is not being made with any studio provided screeners or material, any kind of studio notes, any influence whatsoever. It is just literally a couple of fans and friends talking about the things that they enjoy. But again, acutely aware that those things only exist because of the hard work of the people who are striking, who are deserving of the things that they're asking for. They're not being unreasonable. And again, do look for any ways potentially you can help or show your support. And yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that we are fully in the corner. Everyone on the podcast here, I speak for everyone, including DK. And I think probably all of the upcoming guests, when I say we are fully in support of the Writers Guild and all of the striking organizations against these massive studios who frankly seem a little bit, myopic to say the least. And it says a lot that they seem baffled by why they are not popular. And yet, hopefully there can be a resolution soon, but the only resolution that's going to be any good will be fair treatment for the people that are striking. So we shall wait and see and hope for the best for those of us who enjoy this entertainment. But again, a fair deal is the only way forward. And that's all I wanted to say about that is This podcast should not be viewed as promotion. It should not be viewed as support for the studios. We definitely stand with SAG-AFTRA and the various guilds. So that's hopefully dealt with that. As well as that, I've also been sent an email. If you are a listener of the podcast on the platform known as Stitcher, unfortunately, that platform ended operations on August the 29th, which you might well know if you've been trying to find it. If you go to Stitcher, you will usually be forwarded to their sister site, Pandora. But I have been informed that if you go to the actual Stitcher.com website, you won't be able to access this podcast anymore, or the various lists and things that you were previously able to. It's not a glitch. It's not a problem. Unfortunately, that particular service has ceased its operation. But as I said, you can, if you aren't automatically forwarded to Pandora, which is their sister app, you can go there yourself. It's also worth pointing out we are available on multiple other platforms. I won't list them all, but as well as the obvious YouTube and Spotify, pretty much anywhere you get audio podcasts is another place you can find. So I'm sure if you looked around, you'd be able to locate us. I was just told by Stitcher to let our listeners know that unfortunately they are no longer functioning. So yeah, with all of that sort of boring and unpleasant stuff out of the way, let's get on with this episode. And yeah, if you're listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, we are going to open with a pleasant surprise from first-time podcast guest, but previous quiz show guest, Jeremy Duncan, who has provided us with a fantastic musical treat to open the episode. So without further ado, enjoy Jeremy Duncan.
Head now to Eden. Yea, brother, head now to Eden. No trouble in my body or my mind. Gonna live like a king on whatever I find. Eat all the food and throw away the rind. Yea, brother, yea.
Hailing frequencies are open, fellow warriors, for the return of our Klingon-themed review series. Welcome back to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. I am your usual host, Captain Mike Wilson, or for the purposes of this week's review, Mr. Pellier, because come on, it's Carol Kane. But I'm sure we'll get there later. So yeah, we are back after our brief little hiatus that we had mid-season to accommodate our other podcast and hopefully give you a chance to listen to our top 10 alien ships episode, which if you haven't, please do. It'll still be on the channel. And I did have a few people who commented and said they liked it. There was a couple of people annoyed that their favorite ship didn't make it. Certainly a couple of the Klingon ones that didn't make the list were upsetting some people, I think, but not in a huge way. It was just, there's always going to be fans of things we couldn't fit in. And I think we did a great episode. So hopefully you can all enjoy that. As far as this week goes, we are going to, as you'll have seen by the thumbnail and the description here, we're going to be reviewing our first episode of Strange New Worlds, because when I did the schedule for this Klingon-based season, there hadn't been an episode of Strange New Worlds with the Klingons in, and then season 2 happened, and what do you know, the very first episode of the season, there they were, familiar, bumpy-headed, angry Klingons. So I thought, okay, we'll chuck that into the schedule and try to review it, so that's what we're looking at today. But I'm not going to be doing this alone, as hopefully you will always realize. Unfortunately, my usual co-host DK is not going to be able to make it for us today. He had planned to, but unfortunately he had a negative reaction to Mbenga's stimulant when he was trying to take on a bunch of Klingons. So yeah, he's now, but in all seriousness, he is quite ill and bedbound. So hopefully get better soon, DK. Although by the time this goes out, hopefully you will be better, or we're in deep trouble. But yeah, so he's unfortunately going to have to sit this one out. But I am joined by effectively my other regular co-host. She's been on here so often, she knows the ropes. Welcome back, please, Sandra Eavenson, to the podcast.
I would like the podcast to start now.
Legendary. That was your thing, was it? I should have opened with hit it, but I didn't think. And we are joined by a very special guest, a first-time guest to the podcast proper, though you will have sort of experienced him, so to speak, if you watched our one-off Star Trek Jeopardy special, which he stormed to victory in. Welcome back, Jeremy Duncan. Jeremy, welcome.
Hello.
So this is your first time properly on the podcast. Are you nervous? Because
no,
I know you're
not
expecting
at all. I'm just excited.
Interrogation. Cool. Awesome. Well, if you don't know, for the purposes of Jeremy, who's a first-time guest, and for any listener who might be tuning in for the first time, maybe they're a fan of Jeremy's. I don't know. Maybe we've lost all the fans of DK. Let's hope not. But yeah, so if you are a first-timer, this podcast basically breaks down into sections, which I give little nerdy names. The first section will be basically getting to know you for Jeremy, because we already know all about Sandra, so it's going to be asking him some things about his own fandom and his love for Star Trek that we now know he has. The second section will be the hit or miss section that gives the podcast its name, where I basically throw up a bunch of random things that the guest, and in this case co-host, don't know about, and ask if they think it's a hit or a miss, and then we debate that back and forth. And the final main section will be the actual episode review, where we'll review, as I said, The Broken Circle, which was the first episode of season 2 of Strange New Worlds. So with all that out of the way and settled in, we're going to jump into our first section, the little getting to know you thing, which I rather geekily call Hailing Frequencies Open.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
So, Jeremy, this is basically the section where, when it comes to new guests, we like to ask you your sort of intro to Star Trek and what you like and dislike maybe about it. And I've given Sandra a couple of questions because I don't want it to be just me talking and interrogating you the whole time. We all know you can see 5 lights. So, yes. Sandra, I believe you have the first question that you were going to ask Jeremy in this round.
Hold on. If you reference the 5 lights, then I must say, you are 6 years old. sorry. Okay, go on.
I can't understand, Jeremy, how you could be so mistaken.
Okay.
Go for it, Sandra. What's the first question?
Okay, so Jeremy Bermy,
Mm-hmm.
what first got you into Star Trek? What was your first experience? Kind of what grabbed you about Star Trek?
My mom and my dad love Star Trek. And when I was about in the womb, they started exposing me to it. So I absolutely love it. The first memory I have of an episode of Star Trek is either the end of a mock time where Spock is dejected that Kirk is dead. And then he goes, "Oh, won't you want to ask me something about it?" And then he goes, "Jim," that wonderful elation. Or I can't remember the name of the episode, but the one where Spock, it's in season, no, I'm not going to commit it to a season, but it's the one where the actress who plays Pulaski plays an ambassador for this.
You're looking for "Is There in Truth No Beauty?" From
yes, in Truth No Beauty, the scene where they opened up the casket for the first time. Those are my first memories of Star Trek, and I love the original series. Watched it all the time. I've gotten to a point where my family and I, we will sing the Star Trek cues to each other. Like if somebody's morose, we'll go bum 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 bum, things like that. I love that. But also, I watched Star Trek Next Generation, and around the same time as well. I remember my favorite episode of that one being the one where time was frozen between a Romulan and Starfleet encounter, and Picard couldn't handle the strain of it, and he drew a smiley face in the gas cloud.
Yeah, the warp core explosion. You drew a little smiley face. That was Timescape.
Timescape, yes.
the second to last episode in season 6.
Yes, I love that show as well. And then I got obsessed with Voyager for quite some time. I really love Voyager. My favorite character immediately was the emergency medical hologram. He stole my heart, and he's had it ever since. And
cool.
then
did you? Sorry to interrupt, but did you see the little preview clip from Prodigy season 2 that they had released?
I'm afraid I didn't. I haven't gotten around to watching a lot of Prodigy. I watched up to the mid-season finale, to where we can't go back. We can't go back. That's about as far as I was able to get before it was taken away.
I only mention it because they revealed in that little clip that the holographic Doctor is joining them next season when it gets picked up. So Robert Picardo was back voicing the character, and he was there meeting the characters. And yet another reason why we have to save Star Trek Prodigy. Damn it, it's so good.
Yes. Also, I haven't seen it all yet, so
there's plenty of time. I mean, we don't know if there's even a home for season 2 yet, but I love that show.
but going back to my Star Trek journey. Then I think I didn't really. I mean, and I watched Deep Space Nine in passing, and I watched Enterprise in passing, but at that point, I hadn't really made an effort to watch it all. But then the 2009 Star Trek movie came out, and I loved that thing. The musical score for that movie is just incredible. It sent shivers down my spine. It was so good. Into Darkness disappointed me immeasurably. And then after that, I started getting into other Star Treks and started watching Deep Space Nine with my uncle. And sadly, he passed away about halfway through. And I finished watching it with my mother. But it's always been a special show to me. I think it's my favorite Star Trek show because it talks more about the morally gray situations that you can find yourself in, especially when surrounding war and surrounding occupations and just the ethical questions. And Next Generation did that a little bit, but Deep Space Nine really doesn't shy away from showing their characters in the wrong, from just telling stories that don't necessarily make you admire the crew. And I love that. I absolutely love that. Ooh. And then after that, I watched all Enterprise, and I really liked Enterprise. And not the last episode, but I liked everything else. It was just a way, I think, for them to try and wrap things up in the laziest way possible by just making this last episode a holographic projection. However, that does give us an out to say that perhaps Trip didn't really die, and then
we've all read the books. We know he didn't really die.
Yeah. But, I personally think that they could just reboot Enterprise or revive it and just do 1 or 2 more seasons as a limited series. That's what I thought that they should have done when Paramount Plus got the rights to Star Trek. In order to get people on board before they did something new, they could have finished up their last one. Anyway. But yeah, I love all of those. I had a hard time getting into Discovery, but I ended up loving seasons 3 and 4.
Okay.
And then Strange New Worlds, I adore it. And Picard, I had a lot of fun watching Picard. So
okay. And we know that you haven't yet finished Prodigy, and I'm assuming Lower Decks is just...
Oh, I love Lower Decks as well. I just hadn't mentioned it. I love it. I cannot wait for season 4. It looks so good.
It always looks good. I love that show. So yeah, fair enough. Awesome. Well, that was a very comprehensive answer to the first question. So I dread to think what's going to happen now because I have the second question, which is if you had to pick 3 episodes or movies to show someone that you think represents the very best of the Star Trek franchise, what would they be and why?
Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Visitor, and the episode of Enterprise where Malcolm and Trip are stuck inside a shuttle pod.
Shuttle Pod 1, I love that episode.
Yeah.
That is such a good episode of Star Trek. It's for a bottle show as well. It's just incredible. Yeah, I fully agree. That's 3 fantastic choices, I have to say. And quicker than most people have actually given their answers. There's usually a lot more dawdling. So, yeah, congrats. So, I was not expecting that to be so quick, but those were fantastic answers. And I
had to make up for the lost time.
I was going to say, I tend to ask a reason why. I know, obviously, as a fan, why you would pick those 3, but what would you say were the reasons why?
The character work. The character work in all three of them. I think Trek is at its strongest when it focuses on the characters inside its world. Of course, the morals and the messages and the themes that it purports are important as well. But oftentimes when they're able to line those up with the actual characters, for instance, Wrath of Khan, it's not really about the death of Spock. It's about death. Wrath of Khan is about death and about coming to terms with your mortality. And that's what the whole thing is for Kirk, the whole thing for Khan. The whole point of that is mortality. And in a weird way, Shuttle Pod 1 is also one.
Well, yeah, exactly, because they were facing imminent death. They didn't know they were getting rescued, so that was very much the same kind of thing. Yeah.
And The Visitor is all about the love between a father and a son. And
it's about facing death in a different way, isn't it? It's about facing death from the perspective of the one left behind, really.
Yeah, from grief, And it's also talking about when grief becomes an obsession. Because I think that's the most tragic thing about The Visitor is that grief overtook Jake and it ruined his life. And we are all very thankful and grateful that Jake knew that he was the rubber band that could snap the captain back to the time that he belonged in. But at the same time, a part of you really wishes that he would have just given up and just lived his life because he lost everything because of that obsession.
That's one of the best scenes and one of the greatest scenes I think for Ben Sisko as a character is when you see that he genuinely is devastated that Jake has devoted himself to this and just wants him to live his life. And even though he has that brief window, he's like, look, let me go. You've got a wife, you've got a life of your own. Please live and stop obsessing over this. But then, as I say, the tragedy of that is, of course, that he doesn't. So, yeah.
But yeah, as I said, it's the character work that makes it what it is. Character work has always been the most important thing in Star Trek. This is the last thing I'll say about this before we move on. One of my favorite moments in all of Star Trek is in Plato's Stepchildren. In that story, there's a scene where Spock talks about the anger that he feels towards them for forcing him to feel and forcing him to do things and that he does not wish to do. And Spock says, Doctor, sometimes the healthy release of emotions is most unhealthy for those around you. Yeah. And it is one of the deepest moments in the original series. And just because it's in an episode where Captain Kirk acts like a horse, nobody thinks about it. But, it's a great moment. And Trek is littered with those moments, even in the most interestingly odd episodes.
Yeah. I'll get into it later because there's a little bit of that. I love any time that they delve into that whole situation with Spock. And that does happen in the Broken Circle as well. So I'm sure I'll mention it. But yeah, I love all that. Those are fantastic answers. So, yeah, Sandra, you have the third question, I believe, for Jeremy now as well.
Indeed, I do. This is going to be a fun one. Okay. What would you consider if you had to pick back against the wall? What is your favorite Trek series, and do you have any standout favorite characters?
Well, as I said, it's Deep Space Nine. Favorite characters: Ben Sisko, Jake Sisko, Miles O'Brien. I think as well, Kira was a character who I initially disliked when I first watched it. But as soon as I hit the episode Duet, Duet.
You're just naming all of the best, man.
I just wish that I could have revised my answer from last time and include Duet for the very same reason. Because, that's the episode where Kira really learns to empathize with the Cardassians.
Yeah. And, that last line, he was Cardassian, that's enough. No, it isn't.
It's a wonderful story, and that made me love Kira as well, and she grew on me. I really like all the characters. But if I have to stop myself somewhere, and I'm going to stop myself.
That's fair enough. That's awesome. I can't really fault that. And as a DS9 fan, you obviously picked all favorite characters from that show. I'm not bitter at all, but never mind. No, even as somebody who doesn't appreciate like a lot of the aspects of DS9 that you like, I have heard that a lot, and I love that other people are taking little bits away from that they do like, even if I don't agree with it. Which I'm sure I could debate another time, but yeah.
Okay, to quote Columbo, just one more thing, man. Just one more thing. There's one other Deep Space Nine episode which I wish that I had talked about, which was the episode where there was the infant changeling in the shuttlecraft, and they were fighting over it, and then it died. I think that is one of the most heartbreaking and best episodes of Star Trek because it's just such a gut punch, and sometimes the gut punch episodes are the best.
Yeah, definitely. See, I like a lot of those, but mine would all be from my own favorite series, which would tend to be Next Gen and Voyager. So I'd be naming things like The Offspring as a Gut Punch episode. Where Data makes a daughter who then has to die, kind of thing, you know. Or I can't think of any. There's loads that should pop into my mind, but I can't think of them right now. But enough rambling from me. So the final question then is, with this being a kind of Klingon-themed series of reviews, do you have any favorite Klingon episodes or stories or arcs yourself that you would shout out?
Oh, yes. One of the episodes right before the end of Deep Space Nine, where Worf challenges Gowron and he kills Gowron, is one of my absolute favorites. I also really, really like the episode where Worf goes on a spiritual journey and he finds Kahless. You know, the Kahless, which is a clone grown by the Klingons themselves.
We all hated that. That came up actually earlier in the season, and we were not fans.
The reason I like it is because it draws attention to the fact that Worf is more in tune with the Klingon need, or the needs of the Klingon race, than the entire High Council. I like that story because it actually feeds into a theory of mine that Worf is the realization or the incarnation of Kahless. Because Worf is the truest extent of a Klingon who actually practices what the Klingons preach. Because you see that time and time again in all the Klingon episodes. Most every Klingon is a hypocrite, like people, because we're all people and we're all hypocrites, you know. But for the Klingons, they constantly talk about death and honor and glory, but they never talk about why they are that way. And Worf is the only one who ever asks, well, why is this the way it is? Why is this that? And Worf ends up uniting the entire Klingon Empire time after time after time due to sacrifices that he makes or actions that he takes. So I personally think that he's probably the closest thing to Kahless that the Klingons will ever get. And that's what that episode showed me.
That's a mighty headcanon. I love it. Awesome. That's cool. I could honestly just talk about all of this for about an entire length of a podcast.
Oh, we need to get to the broken circle.
Yeah, well, we have to get to the hit or miss section first. So that's going to be, an experience and a half because it's your first time doing that. And I haven't done one of these for a while, but I have it prepped and ready. And Sandra, are you ready to be interrogated a little bit on this one?
I am, but I'm relying on Jeremy's excellent encyclopedic knowledge of it to remind me the context behind these things. That's usually my trouble.
That's fair enough. Well, what it is, if you are, again, new to the podcast and for the purposes of Jeremy, I'm just going to pop up 6 random things. Hopefully we'll get to all 6 from anything in the Star Trek universe. And I'm going to just simply tell you what it is, put a picture up on screen and ask if you think it's a hit or a miss. A little bit of an explanation as to why. We're going to ask Jeremy first as the guest, then Sandra, then myself, and then we'll hopefully come to a consensus. Keeping it, we always keep it nice, even if people disagree. So there shouldn't be any issue there. Although we might have an issue with Sandra remembering what the actual things are that we're going to pop up. So it can vary. It can be ships, characters, episodes, etc. And I try to, because this is a Klingon themed series, I do try to mix in quite a few Klingon stuff, not entirely, because I don't want it to be completely sweeping the hit or miss section, but that'll be why you see a few Klingon related things popping in.
What about my performance?
I'm not a drama critic.
So the first thing on the section for this particular episode then is a ship, and it is Klingon themed. So hit or miss the Klingon sarcophagus ship, aka the Ship of the Dead from the first season of Discovery. And Jeremy, we're coming to you first as the guest. Would you say it's a hit or a miss?
Well, as much as I love Star Trek, there are some things which don't quite work, and this is one of them. It's a miss for me, mainly because it does not resemble any other kind of Klingon ship near enough. It just looks like a different alien species should own this ship.
Right. Yeah, I think that was the case with a lot of Discovery's early designs. I can't really disagree with you on that one, but I'll get to my thoughts in a moment. But what about you, Sandra? Would you say hit or a miss?
I also thought it was a miss, and I wasn't sure why, but I do agree. Like, the interior was very stage-like.
Yeah.
It just definitely didn't feel very Klingon, but then also, remembering that was our first introduction to all the Klingons, and I think there was just, for the series, and I think there was just already a bad taste in everybody's mouth, like, whoa, what is this? That kind of went along with it. Just they were maybe changed a bit too much in that first episode.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, weirdly, I was gonna say, and I'll stick to it because I won't be swayed. I was gonna say soft hit, like not a full hit, but I liked it. I can't disagree with you that the design is way too un-Klingon, but I'll be honest, it's the least of the Klingon designs, if you know what I mean, because a lot of the other ones in Discovery were far worse. So at least I can vaguely see kind of Klingon shapes in this one. But what really sold me was just the general idea, because it's unexpected for Star Trek, and yet it kind of fits for me the idea of the Klingons, that they would have a ship to honor the dead, and they'd have a ship that was just made up of what's the word I'm looking for, like sarcophagi, basically, with dead Klingons in.
Yeah. Apologies to interrupt, but the concept is admirable. I liked the concept.
Yeah.
It's just I thought we were talking specifically about the ship design.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but if we're talking the concept, then I guess I would have to say soft hit as well, because having a ship to honor the dead is excellent, but then what they do with it is definitely not. Anyway,
no, I'm with you. And I think it's kind of annoying because I wish that it had been a better kind of special effect and a better way of portraying that, because there are scenes when they send out the corpse of Rejak, the torchbearer, and you first see the way that he's kind of deployed, I guess, onto the hull and stuff. That's really cool. But again, you can barely see it because it's in that first season where everything's overly dark and moody. So, it would have been, if you could imagine that in a kind of TNG era situation, that would have been a really cool scene. But I still got what they were going for. But like I said, that's why it's a soft hit, because for me, again, in the execution, it just fell a little tiny bit flat. But good ideas anyway. So I think we can, we'll probably go ahead and just call that a miss, but just, I think, overall. Let me see if I can find the second thing then. So the second thing on my list for today is an episode. And again, it is Klingon related. It's an episode of Voyager. And it is the first season episode, Faces. And if you guys need remembering about what this episode was, then by all means, let me know and I'll tell you. Jeremy, are you familiar with this one?
I am familiar with this one, and it's fine. The thing is, I think Voyager was very weak when it began with the character work.
Right.
So whenever they tried like this, I had to give it respect, because like Voyager usually in the earlier seasons would be like, oh yes, new character trait. We just learned Harry Kim plays an instrument. That's not a character trait. That's a thing that he does.
Yeah.
That's completely different. A character trait is this person afraid, or does this person have to do they have a prejudice that they have to overcome, or does this person have something that they deal with on the ship relationship wise that they just are struggling with? That's what makes you remember a character, not, oh, he plays oboe and, oh, this one really likes old TV, but at the same time, this story, it's a trope that's done to death. But I think that Voyager does it well in this story. So it's kind of a soft hit. Okay,
cool. We'll probably come back to you for some more thoughts if you have any. But what about you then, Sandra? Would you say hit or a miss? And do you remember the episode, first of all?
Yes, I do remember it now. I thought it was a hit because of the whole Klingon, half human fight that we always saw.
B'Elanna.
Spock. Well, yeah, that we always saw Spock kind of dealing with in his, and then also how it related to Worf's human upbringing and the things that he was facing, and I just thought it was kind of a good soup of all of that stuff. So I liked that. I don't remember a whole lot else about the episode, but based on my memory of that, I would also soft hit.
Okay, fair enough. I'll probably be the most vocally positive then, because I just love this. So I was going to say hit for me, because I'm a big fan of Voyager from the start, basically, unlike you by the sounds of it, Jeremy. So I kind of loved it, and I loved bits and pieces of the character work. And this is one of the stronger ones because Roxanne Dawson is a fantastic actress, and I love the way she plays both the kind of Klingon B'Elanna who's disgusted at her other self, and the human one who kind of has little tender moments like touching her head, which now doesn't have ridges, and remembering kind of like blaming herself for her father leaving because she was too Klingon and things like that coming up. And I thought that was actually some really great character work in the episode. And I think it was a good use of the Vidians who they'd already kind of introduced, and they'd done the one kind of thing that you could do with them, which was, they stole an organ. What are you going to do? And I was like, oh, well, when this species comes back, what are we doing now? So it was kind of nice the way they folded them in. And it's almost got nothing to do with the sort of overall plot, but I will say it's a little thing, but I love the idea that they cast the same actor to play the lead Vidian doctor and the Starfleet officer who gets taken in. So that at the point when he kind of like steals the guy's face and puts it on, it's the same actor, so you can get away with that. And it adds so much more to the grossness of like, you're wearing that guy's face, which I really appreciated as well.
I like the Vidians. They're a really weird, scary villain. Voyager always had the best villains. Oh, yeah.
Well, the Kazon were just basically, low budget Klingons, but otherwise.
The Kazon are Kazon, and they are good anyway.
Fair enough. I'll let you off.
Okay.
I will say it probably took a Cardassian spy to make them interesting, but you would probably disagree. So yeah. No, that's cool. I think we all liked it anyway. Then this episode faces, so I'm going to go ahead and call that a hit as well. So yeah. I love Roxanne Dawson just in general. Every B'Elanna episode of Voyager, I think, was great. As I mentioned when we reviewed, what was it again? This season, it was Barge of the Dead that we reviewed earlier.
Oh, that was so good.
Yeah, it really is. So the third thing on the list for today is not Klingon related, but it does relate to Strange New Worlds, weirdly enough. So it's a character, although it doesn't just relate to Strange New Worlds. I suppose there is a bit of a TOS vibe. So hit or miss for the character of Lieutenant Commander Una Chain Riley, a.k.a. Number One. Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
If you had asked me during season 1, I would have said miss. But since we have the context of Ad Astra Perispera, or if that's how it goes, then
that's exactly right.
Yeah, then I would say big hit, big hit, because her character should have had an episode more focused on herself. Because I don't think that the Illyrian episode from season 1 was enough.
No, I agree.
And so this story introduced who the character really was. And it's played so well by Rebecca Romijn. It is a wonderful character. Yeah. Yeah,
cool. What about you, Sandra? Would you say hit or miss for the character?
I really thought a big hit for me. Contrary to how I feel about the non-platonic relationship developing between Nurse Chapel and Spock, I love the deep platonic relationship between Una and Pike. And, we just don't get that often. And so just from the very beginning, there was just like a lot of respect for her shown. And I immediately liked every single character in Strange New Worlds, but I really did like Una. And her portrayal by Rebecca Romijn just really great.
Fantastic. I mean, to your point, that kind of relationship between Pike and Una, even though it's horrifically sexist, is even present in The Cage when he's like, I can't get comfortable with a woman on the bridge. But of course, number one, you're different. So you kind of get the sense of like, there's some kind of bond between the two of them even then. As I say, it's not particularly handled well, but...
It's okay. Sorry. Tiny rabbit hole about that. I always thought that would have been a very interesting thing to explore. Like that Pike is slightly... Because Pike seems like he has basically no flaws except for a fear of commitment. And so I feel like it would have been interesting had they had just a little bit of that sexism in his character and had him work it out throughout the season, throughout the series, to give him a bit of a journey. But I suppose showing himself his impending doom is also a pretty good character arc. So
yeah, I just don't think it would fly because it would make the character, I think, too unlikable in this day and age. And
I suppose so, but it would have been good for him to I don't know. It's just going to be jarring whenever we go back to the cage now. Because
it is, but it's one of those things you kind of have to hand wave away, like with so many of the early TOS, where you're just like,
I suppose so, yeah. I just
there's an episode, one of the first episodes when Spock says that, what was it? Oh, just because one of my ancestors happened to marry a human, and I watch that now, and I'm like, your dad married your mom.
To be fair, that sounds like a very Spock thing for him to say, especially if he doesn't know Kirk very well. He's like trying to, wave away his human heritage. He's like, oh, one of my ancestors. Well, he's technically correct, Anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is the best kind of correct.
Nice Futurama reference.
I agree with you. I'm obsessed with The Cage and always have been, even though I recognize a lot of the kind of, like I said, problematic aspects of 60s television in there. But I think for what it is, I think it's fantastic, and it's one of my favorite Trek episodes, and I've always lamented the fact that it was rejected by the network as, nobody's going to like this. It's too cerebral. Give us a bunch of action. And then we got that ridiculous oh, we've gone past the galactic barrier and developed psychic superpowers, which for me is a much worse pilot. But okay.
Where No Man Has Gone Before is just trash. I'm sorry. It's one of the
Exactly,
few TOS episodes I really don't like.
Yeah. Speaking of continuity errors, where he has the grave marked James R. Kirk, which you also have to hand wave for. Anyway, but yeah, so I love the character anyway, because, well, I mean, it was Michelle Barrett, so you're automatically on, good terms with me by casting Michelle as any character. So, and I think she portrayed it really well, and there was something fascinating. But the problem Strange New Worlds had, and which it's thankfully sidestepped, is that all the character traits that were number ones in the cage eventually were given to Spock when it was picked up for series, because they were told by the network, we don't want a female first officer, it's too much in this day and age, whatever. So the cold, calculating, computer-like stuff was all pushed onto Spock, and it's hard to have two characters that are basically that. And so when Strange New Worlds came out, I was like, this is going to be interesting to see how they thread this needle. And what they've actually done is fascinating, because they've kind of brought both of them to almost an equilibrium middle point where Spock's not quite fully, computer-like and fully logical yet, but we're seeing how he could end up there. And number one was there and has gradually become more and more open with her feelings and more human, because it turns out, she was reserved because of this huge secret. And now she's realized keeping that secret was the reason that she didn't open up and closed herself off. And ironically, one of the favorite moments in the musical is when she basically discusses with Kirk, I made that mistake and I kept closed off, and the best thing you can do is connect to your crew. And now I've learned this. Or even when she's singing with La'an and says, keeping secrets is terrible. I did it for years and it did me no good. And now that it's out, I'm finally able to open up. And I was like, this is such good. Nobody will give it credit amongst the haters, but it's such good writing for developing parts of a character who was like 60 years old. And you're like, okay, we have to move her away from everything you know about her, but we're going to do it subtly, and then hopefully, move you into a place where you can understand why when TOS launches, Spock will now be that cold, logical computer, and number one will hopefully get more of a character, which he has. And as he said, I'm with you. I think for season one, I was just desperate for it to get an episode which showed something. And I was waiting for Ad Astra per Aspera, as it turns out, because then when it aired, I was like 10 out of 10 episode. I absolutely flipping love this episode. It's fantastic. And that explained everything for me. And then, like I said, even the rest of the season didn't give her a lot to do, but even in the little moments, it was explaining why she was, like I said, opening up a little bit more. And I like that. So hopefully we'll see more of her in season 2.
I like the moment in the Lower Decks crossover where Boimler finally told her why he was so nervous around her, because he idolized her. And that was so sweet.
Yes, it was. And as a complete sucker for real life situations, I just love the fact that her actual husband had to call her the hottest first officer in Starfleet.
Yes.
Yeah, I get what you did there, Star Trek. Yeah. Awesome. That's pretty solid hit, I would say, for number one. So hopefully my rambling didn't put anybody too far off. I got down a bit of a rabbit hole there. The next one is another ship then, just quickly, and it is Klingon-based again. And it was one of the ones that was lamented that it didn't make our top alien ships episode. So hit or miss for the Vorcha class, Jeremy?
Hit. It's a great, it's a very great adaptation of a classic design for the next generation of Star Trek. It's great. Cool.
And what about you, Sandra?
I think hit just based on the aesthetics, and that I can't find any other fault with it.
I'm going to say I do think it's a hit, but I think it's a soft hit for me, and I can understand why it didn't make the list against the likes of the Bird of Prey, the D7, and the Katinga, because there's something a little bit, to me, just too plasticky almost about it, if that makes sense. And it doesn't look quite as solid or rigid as the older, designs that feel lived in and metal and which makes sense. I mean, it's the next gen era, so even Starfleet tech and stuff was very comfortable. I get that even the Klingon designs would be a little bit smoother, but they're Klingons. I don't love that it's, it looks very sterile to me. But again, the design at least keeps the kind of key battlecruiser elements, and it's still recognizably Klingon, unlike, as we mentioned, like the season 1 Discovery ships where you just start throwing shapes against the wall and seeing what sticks. So I still think it's a hit for me, but for me, it's a soft hit and not as good as the classic ones. Yeah. Thoughts on that, Jeremy? You sound like you were having agreement or disagreement with me there.
Oh, I understand where you're coming from. It's just, when it comes to the ships of Trek, I kind of connected more to Next Gen, really, of the designs that I liked. So it's just kind of a bias, I think. But yeah, that's fine. I understand why it's just a soft hit for you, though.
Cool. Fair enough. Back to Strange New Worlds. So hit or miss for the character of Captain Angel. And I've just watched this episode, so it's fresh in my mind. So, Jeremy, what about you?
I love Captain Angel. Oh my goodness, the charisma they have. The charisma
I know, right?
is incredible. I absolutely love it. Also related to Cybok, my favorite Vulcan other than Spock. And so, I mean, that's what my Discord name is based off of. If you didn't know, a laughing Vulcan.
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I love them as well. It's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, but I'll get into it. Sandra, what about you? What do you think?
I also thought big hit, and I know what you're going to go into. You loved their soliloquy, but I also loved that the nature of this person wasn't even discussed or an issue. What their nature was, or anything about them. It was just all about the character, and they just were, because this is a time when that sort of thing is so commonplace and not discussed, you know, where we want our world to be.
Do you mean with regards to the character being like non-binary, basically?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they even were, because we don't know.
Well, they were, but that's the thing. I've looked it up, and the actor who plays the role does use she, her pronouns, though she is trans. And the character, though, is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns, which is, it's weird to get that confused and keep it straight in your head. But I was like, okay, I'll try and bear that in mind. So, because you want to pay respect to both. But yeah, it was very unclear, because the thing is that they were imitating a different person when they first came on board who was also a non-binary. And I was like, oh, so was that part of the ruse, or are you actually, you know? So, but no, it's clear enough when you actually watch the episode and you care. But no, I mean, I was going to say the soliloquy you're talking about is probably when they go into, like, you know, people want to always put you in boxes to Spock and things like that. And I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like that scene, but overall, it's not even the thing that I like most about the character. I just love that Star Trek hasn't really had this good and charismatic of a villain in years.
Yes.
Like they are genuinely a fantastic foil for the crew. They are evil, but absolutely having fun with it, if you know what I mean. Like, they probably wouldn't regard themselves as evil, but they are just having the absolute time of their life, like sitting in the captain's chair with absolute glee of like, this is my ship now. What are you going to do about it? It's just, and like you said, it's just that sheer charm and everything. You can see how they would lead this gang of pirates and get away with it, even though we see that they're kind of like a rabble when Pike and the rest of the crew get captured. But you're like, yeah, I can imagine that these people would fall in line, and I can imagine, you know, why Cybok would have a connection even with them. And I really want to see them again, because there's got to be a reason they escaped, right? At the end of that episode.
We'll see them again.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I just think that performance was absolutely top notch. And like I said, for a villain performance, it's something that it's really hard to get right. And like I said, the only things that spring to mind are like Q maybe has a bit of that playful, loving, being naughty, I guess, thing about him. But it's, yeah, Star Trek notoriously has a bit of a struggle with that. Massive hit it's going to look like overall then for Captain Angel. And the last thing is, again, Strange New Worlds related, because I just had to throw it in since it has now aired. Hit or miss for the episode, Those Old Scientists, Jeremy.
Massive hit. I love it. I love it a lot. It's very respectful to the characters of Lower Decks. They feel as though they are not in any way, shape, or form playing caricatures of their animated selves. It just felt like they were ripped straight out of the show and put into live action. There's no other way to put it. And it was done with such love and such care that it just feels perfect. It is probably my favorite episode. Now, what I wish would have happened, can you imagine if this happened at the same time as Subspace Rhapsody?
I know, right?
Boimler would be losing his mind. But anyway, that aside, I do think that this is a wonderful episode. And I really like that we get to see a side of Pike that we don't get to see so often, which is him being aggravated to the point of popping a blood vessel almost with these two. I really enjoyed that he was frustrated with them. And also that scene where he's like, yeah, no, I know about my fate. They're like, wait, you know?
And yeah, I'm with you. I saw a lot of criticism from the usual, you know, corners, not to start naming names, but that were like, well, these characters act like cartoon characters. And I'm like, do they? I mean, they act like themselves, but I wouldn't say that, like you said, they're not over the top and cartoonish as such. It's
clearly you didn't get to know kind of obnoxious teenagers to early 20s people in your life.
Exactly, yeah. Awesome. What about you, Sandra? Would you say hit or miss for the episode?
Also, I really loved it. Big hit for me. I really thought they did fit in the style of humor that was in this episode. It still fit even with the serious nature of previous episodes of Strange New Worlds. You know, it wasn't that much of a stretch. Worf's honor. It was so funny.
Awesome. No, and I agree. And I was going to say one of the things, like, I loved it and I was always going to love it because I love both of the shows. But I love that they did what I expected, which was to get the humor in and get all the jokes and the Lower Decks references. But what I wasn't expecting was that it would literally end up being key to the kind of dramatic line of the season for the characters. Like, it's because of Boimler that Chapel realizes that her and Spock have no future. And you would never have guessed that, like, this hilarious kind of, knockabout guy from the future coming to give you a comedy episode would effectively change the dynamics of all those relationships. Like I said, it's the one that basically lets Pike know you might know your fate and think you're doomed, but you are loved and you are going to become a legend, you know, when he hears that Boimler dressed up as him for Halloween. You know, had to contour the heck out of the jawline, but, you know, and it's like, I've been desperate for something like that since Pike first learned his fate, because I'm like, you've got to remember, just let him know at least that, you know, even though the worst may well happen, you'll be remembered well. And I love that he now kind of knows that. You know?
And it was so cool that it was our voices too as fans. They were fans of all the same things we're fans of and exactly. Gawk over. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You were saying, Jeremy?
I would say, I think something that is kind of tragic, but also kind of lovely about Pike's story and him knowing his own fate is that he only sees the darkness to come. He doesn't know that Spock is going to rescue him from that in the menagerie. Yeah. Which I think is why this whole show basically makes the menagerie one of the most beautiful episodes of the entirety of Star Trek. Yeah. It's really going to be great to see if they, at the end of the series, are able to reflect on what happens to Pike in the end.
I hope so, and I hope they do more. I feel bad saying this, but I hope they do more about the whole relationship between Pike and Vina, because I know they touched on it during Discovery Season 2, but then they kind of seem to have focused heavily on this relationship with Batel. And it's kind of like, we know she's not in the menagerie and she's not who he kind of ultimately ends up with. We are kind of...
She got Gorn eggs!
We're unfortunately privileged with that information. And I'm kind of like, I feel awful now because it's like, she can't be the love of his life because we know who is, if you know what I mean. And that's who he's going to end up with. And that's his kind of happy ending. So, but yeah. At the same time, I like Batel and I like that relationship and I don't want it to get, you know, Ripley'd. But, you know, we'll see what happens, I guess, when season 3 eventually launches in 2028. But yeah, those old scientists, just great. I love these actors anyway, the voice actors, as well as all the Strange New World stuff. And like you said, the voice of the fans, like little moments like when Mariner's saying, I wouldn't want to go back there because if I screw up now, it's no big deal. But if I screw up in front of Uhura, come on. It'd be so embarrassing. Yep, I get what you're saying. So yeah, awesome. Right, so that concludes the hit or miss section. That wasn't too rough on anyone, hopefully, and I think we came to mostly positive conclusions. So without any further ado, then we are going to jump into the main review, and I am going to say we are going to start our analysis of this episode.
Spock analysis.
So, and I'll say the episode we're looking at is The Broken Circle from Strange New Worlds. Before we get into anything, I do have a little behind-the-scenes thing, because I like to get a little bit of sort of background and things, just with random bits and pieces, so I'll read them out. Hopefully it'll not be too boring, and if you have any thoughts on that, you guys, you can chime in and let me know. So, just to get us started then. Chronologically, this is the first known instance where Spock and Uhura are involved in stealing the Enterprise. Spock later went on to hijack the Enterprise by himself, as Jeremy noted, for Pike, during the events of the Menagerie Part 1, while Uhura aided in a joint effort with the rest of the crewmates during the events of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. So, yeah. Spock's successful negotiations with the Klingons sets up a slight recurring gag that would be used again at the conclusion of Subspace Rhapsody, and it also foreshadows his efforts to pursue peace between the Klingons and the Federation in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. which might be getting looked at in a few weeks. The Gorn attack ship at this episode's climax is seen on a stellar chart approaching the Galdon Tear system. That is a place where the albino would narrowly escape from a confrontation with Kang, Koloth, Kor, and Curzon Dax either before or during 2345, as mentioned in the DS9 episode Blood Oath. So, very random continuity reference. Since the events of last season's finale, Uhura has graduated from Starfleet Academy and been promoted to ensign, something which does come up in this episode when La'an mentions it. And if you're curious, Anson Mount has a reduced presence in the first couple of episodes of season 2, including this one, because his wife had just given birth. And as a result, he was effectively on paternity leave for the first few weeks of filming. So if you're wondering why there's a shortage of Captain Pike in those first couple of episodes, that's why. So, yeah.
I think that actually just gave the show the chance and the motivation to explore the other characters a little deeper. And I like that.
Exactly. Right.
I like that it gives Spock a chance to take command for the first time and have to.
Yes. Yes,
Sure.
I love that.
Awesome. Well, again, if you're new here, and for the sake of our new guest, we are breaking down. We don't tend to go chronologically because it gets a little bit, synopsis of the episode, and that can be a bit boring. So we break it down into just random things like writing, plot, director, acting, visual effects, sound, etc. But we don't, stick to any strict rules. So if we just talk about things and then veer off towards another thing, then as long as it's relevant, we just follow the path. So I have a few things that I wanted to bring up, which is. First of all, obviously, this is the first appearance of Klingons on Strange New Worlds, and the first appearance of them, I think, in any live-action Trek since Discovery's first couple of seasons, and the somewhat misstep there. So what did you think about the plots with regards to the Klingons in this episode, Jeremy?
I thought they were good, and I also thought that the design of the Klingons was a healthy hybrid of Berman era or original movie era Klingons with the Discovery elements. You could see that the ridges were a little more pronounced and they went back further into the head.
They were on some of them, but some of them didn't look that way. That was the weird part, I thought. Yeah.
Well, I think they were just trying to basically say it's a regional thing. Sort of like, I think they did that with another alien. They
did it with the Romulans in Picard. They said one of them was a northerner.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that the Klingons in this episode were quite well done. I also really liked that that the Klingon War was used as a source of trauma this season for some crew members, like M'Benga and Chapel specifically.
That was one of the things I was going to mention because I'm not as fond of that, but I knew it was going to kind of naturally come up. So, yeah, you have the floor then, Jeremy. What did you kind of love about that plotline and try and sell me on it, I guess?
Well, in this episode particularly, M'Benga gives that incredibly chilling description of how there was blood in the air on the moon of Chagall.
There was so much blood in the air that the rain turned red.
Yeah. And I
talk about overdramatic.
Well, yes, but it's still... I think that once you see the actual episode about M'Benga confessing he is the butcher of Chagall,
I hated that so much.
I think what that does is it shows you that war and trauma can change anyone. And it doesn't mean that it can corrupt them forever, but it can change and affect their perceptions very deeply. I understand the aversion to using the Klingon War for something like this, because it kind of feels like the majority of New Trek, when it comes to Discovery, it's been stuck inside the Klingon War, that they've just been thinking about that for ages. But I personally think that it's not an era of Trek which has been explored enough. Take a look at the fan project Anaxar. The reason why that gained as much traction as it did, even though it was a complete scam, was because that it dealt with that era of Trek that everyone so desperately wanted more information about. And I think that they were giving those fans really what they wanted, and at the same time making it relevant for our characters.
Regarding that, I think it was also the obvious choice. It's like before the time, like saying if we have wartime people who fought in the war and it's placed in the 40s, we're going to say they were in World War II and this location or that location. So it's kind of just, it was the, this what was happening at the time.
I think that there's two things that are my biggest issues with this, and I may as well bring them up now. And the first one is that I don't love that they're using legacy original series characters and, in my opinion, kind of sullying them. Like, I didn't need to know, and I think it's kind of a dishonor to the original actor who played Mbenga that he's like a butcher of the Klingons. And I'm kind of like, I get what you're doing, but I would have preferred you to use another character. Having said that, as you mentioned, Jeremy, now that you've sold me on the idea of like, well, the point is it changes you, but not forever, I can kind of see why it would make sense to use that character a bit more now.
But also, my question is, why does it sully them? Why do you think that it sullies them?
I just don't like any kind of, as you know, I don't like any time when Starfleet are portrayed as less than kind of morally superior, just because that's kind of what I came for. I came for the escapism part. Like I said, I don't like In the Pale Moonlight, which everybody else loves, because I'm like, I don't consider it a great end to your story when your captain is like, well, I effed up. I broke every rule. I'm very immoral, but what are you going to do about it? I'm like, oh, terrible ending. You know what I mean? So, but
well, I think that when Star Trek is morally gray, that's when it's at its best, because Star Trek's never supposed to tell you what's right. It's never supposed to tell you what is going on. It hasn't ever since the original series. Star Trek, since its conception, it brings up issues. It brings up parallels. For instance, Let This Be Your Last Battlefield. The two factions, what is it? Commodore Beale and Lokai. Those two, it's obviously trying to bring up racial violence and racial unrest between the white population and the African American population at the time. But the episode itself never goes out to say, oh, well, this one is right and this one is wrong. It talks about how both of their approaches might have something wrong, but it never commits to something, because the whole point of Star Trek is that it raises conversation. It's not supposed to give you the end-all be-all answers. And I think I would counter slightly and say that the point of that episode in particular is that it is trying to teach you something, and I think there is a lot there which a lot of the kind of more right-wing Trek fans never see. But it's not trying to, as you said, put the blame on one side or the other. It's basically trying to teach you bigotry is stupid. It will ultimately just get you killed. You know what I mean? Very true. Very true. But in that same way, there are many aspects of the Klingon War, and using that for Mbenga and Chapel, which they're not bad people because that they fought in that war. It doesn't tarnish who they are. That was their duty to Starfleet. And I feel as though saying that it sullies them is a bit strong, because I think that it just made them a better character to explore, really. Because let's think about it. Chapel, she had that one episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of, in the original series, and the love plot with Spock. She had basically no character besides that.
She does in the animated series, for what it's worth.
Well, in the animated series, yes, in Mud's Passion. And in the Lorelei Signal, she does. But I feel as though they didn't give her enough. They never gave her enough of a strong character outside of her love life. Really?
No, well, again, she was very much that character. She was never intended to be anything other than a background character. They'd already basically sneaked her back in, because I said the network were like, we don't like this actress, get rid of her, when she was cast as number one, and then dyed her hair blonde, chuck her around into the role and hope nobody noticed. So for the first season, they were just like, shh, go to the background a little bit so nobody notices. So you're absolutely right.
And Mbenga. You talking about Mbenga. Mbenga was in like 2 episodes of the original series, just as a background character. And as much as I like Mbenga, he clearly is not a character who was explored at all in the original series. And so they can do whatever they like with him.
I disagree. I like the character of the original series, because even though it's only 2 episodes, I love, first of all, the fact that it's yet another kind of African-American face where nothing's made out of it. It's just like another crew member, which I don't think we can underplay how important that was in the 60s, that it wasn't like a big deal. But also I thought that there were interesting aspects to his character, and they are touched on in this episode, which is that he's a human who's very acutely aware of like Vulcan physiology and has become like an expert doctor when it comes to Vulcans. And I'm like, explore that. I would love to know why did this human being become such an expert on Vulcans, and to the part that he's like the one that when Spock becomes like, fallen down with this illness, he's the go-to guy. Even McCoy's like, well, I could treat him, but this guy over here is far better, because he's like the whiz when it comes to Vulcans. And I'm like, why? You haven't explored the slightest bit. And again, they do it in the broken circle and be like, oh, I know Vulcans because of, so I know this and this is the case, and you repress your emotions. And I'm like, so show us why. Instead of showing us the depressing kind of bitter, I fought in the war history, I want to know why he studied Vulcans and what that's about,
I really liked it as far as it pertained to his character development because, well, I feel like they're showing that he's not just overcoming his role in the war, but he's overcoming something extreme. But then it also became an element of his preparedness and why, even as a doctor who's on missions of exploration, feels the need to have this super soldier serum on him at all times. And, just in case he has to get out of a situation, he's that on alert. He's that scared all the time. And I think that's just playing into, the character development, and who knows where that will go from here.
Yeah, I think a couple of points I wanted to raise with regard to that was, first of all, I kind of resent the fact that if this was going to be the case, it's weird how it didn't come up at all during the first season. It was never part of his character. It just feels like they wrote the first season with regards to his storyline with his daughter and then finished that storyline up and were like, oh shit, we need something for this character to do now. And so they gave him this backstory at the start of season 2 out of nowhere, which is kind of like, it would have been nice if they touched on it perhaps a little bit beforehand.
Trek does that a lot. Trek does that a whole lot.
I can live with the kind of, especially as I hear why you guys like it, I can live with the kind of, they're veterans of the Klingon War storyline. What I don't like, and as you've already touched on, and I'll call on DK here because he did say he was going to throw this in as an audio gag, is that when this came up, he was going to play this music. So what I don't like is Mbenga injecting himself with a serum and effectively the music doing this. Yeah, that was DK's joke. Personally, I saw it more as a super soldier serum thing. But
yeah, I also, even though I love Mbenga and I loved what they did with him, I feel like the serum was a little dumb because
a little dumb.
I'm trying to be pragmatic, man, but I feel like it was unnecessary because if he truly was going through all of the adrenaline of the war and everything, he wouldn't need that serum. He could just, out of his pure, trauma, just do it. Just, just the pure.
Yeah, but these are Klingons.
Well, I understand that, but there are many human fighters who are able to beat Klingons in other areas of Trek. And I don't really think that they needed to put him on super adrenaline because, I mean, I don't know what that adds.
It's just a dumb plot line. I really didn't like it because I thought the same. It was stupid. It was kind of a plot line too far. And it was like, again, it came out of nowhere. You suddenly have, turns out you've had this on you for your entire life, but we've never mentioned it before. You invented it. It's some kind of, like I said, magic super soldier serum that's never going to come up again in any future Trek or anything. And it's just kind of like...
I mean, if they do bring it up again and about how it is physiologically damaged in Mbenga, and then I'd be happy with it. If they were to talk about the effects of it, sort of like with Garrick and his addiction.
Or if they contrast it with how much they are against augmenting humans, unless it's for 10 minutes.
Yes, exactly.
I actually was fine with this because it also allowed Chapel to join in on the ass kicking. So I was personally fine with the little.
The thing is, this version of Chapel I can believe would be an ass kicker anyway. Like I wouldn't believe it of the Majel Barrett version because I said she was very 60s. Oh, I'm only here for love, D&T damsel in distress in the background. But even just after one season, this version of Chapel that Jess Bush plays, I'm like, yeah, she could kick your ass.
Yeah, but even if we don't like the fight scene and the fighting, all that, the fight scene was so well done. It was.
I have to disagree.
I think that the way that it was shot, they looked like they were struggling for real, and.
I think they ruined it by doing the stupid strobe lighting thing. That was what ruined it for me. Like,
I didn't even notice.
I was just thinking about the blocking. The blocking of the fight was absolutely incredible because it shows how difficult it is to take down a Klingon. But it's still possible.
And from the moment they dropped into that lower deck, that camera turn, 180 turn, that was really neat.
I don't know, man. I don't really go to Star Trek expecting John Wick, I guess is the problem. But yeah, no, it wasn't that so much as the strobe lighting was just far too much, and it just reeked of like, we are hardcore, we are edgy, and that was what I got from the kind of, instead of the, you know, the serum thing being a cool plot device that they could go with, it was just like, let's do something edgy,
I understand
Tarantino
that.
Trek, you know what I mean? It's just like, so yeah, I didn't love that, and I also, this is a complete nitpick, but I didn't like that on a plot level they established that the Broken Circle as a group are made up of Klingon and Federation members who want war, because they are like miners and stuff.
Yeah, that was
and
surprising.
Yet it's incredibly kind of like,
Isn't it the exact same plot as the Undiscovered Country?
Well, more or less, yeah, effectively, yeah.
Yeah. Well, not the same plot, but the same motivations and the same parties.
It's the same plot as Redemption if you just take away the humans and replace them with Romulans.
True, yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't like that. Like I said, they make a point of saying it's not just the Klingons, which makes sense on a script level. But then all that Mbenga and Chapel fight are Klingons, which just feels like it plays into that bigotry aspect of like, you didn't fight a single human there? But yeah, again, that was a bit of a nitpick, but I was like, you could have thrown in a couple of human beings that they were beating the crap out of as well, you know?
That's a really good nitpick. That's a really good one.
Yeah, it would have even been, imagine how much more kind of impactful it would be if Mbenga's beating the crap out of a human just because he's on this whatever, and like Chapel's like, okay, you're going too far, you're applying too much force, this isn't a Klingon, and maybe he sees them as a Klingon or whatever, and you're like, okay, calm down.
That would be neat. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, missed opportunities more than anything.
I think you need to be the script editor for Strange New Worlds. Yeah.
Don't say things like that. I do not want Robert Meyer Burnett complaining about me on a weekly basis, which I'm sure he would. But no, that's fair enough. Well, I think we've kind of talked that to death. But
yes,
I think I don't think I'm on board with it, but I'm a lot more. And I respect that you guys liked it, and that's fine. And I will say DK said the same thing. He didn't love the serum aspect of it, but he didn't mind the Chapel and Mbenga sort of backstory. So he's probably more on you guys' side as well, which is fair enough. Absolutely. This is again such a ridiculous nitpick, but I have to bring it up because it bugged the crap out of me when the episode happened, which is when the false flag Federation ship takes off and Lieutenant Mitchell identifies it as a Crossfield class ship. And being a ship nerd, I immediately scream at my TV, that's not a Crossfield class ship. What are you talking about?
She said it looks like. She wasn't really sure.
But it doesn't even look like one.
Yeah. I don't know enough about the ships themselves.
Well, the Crossfield class is the same class as the original Discovery and the Glen, so it should look nothing like the ship in this episode, other than the primary hull, the saucer section is identical, which I get. Like, I can understand they might say, and maybe a line like that would have been like, it looks like it's got a Crossfield section saucer or whatever, and that's entirely because they wanted to reuse Discovery sets, so that when Mbenga and Chapel have their fight, it's on a starship that you don't have to make whole new sets of. Not that I would notice that kind of thing anyway, but I read in like the behind the scenes, that's why they decided to go with that. Was like,
that's smart.
You know, we already have the sets here, why not use them though? Yeah.
Well, you know, they were also kind of reconstructing the entire ship from scratch, so you could kind of.
Oh, I get plot-wise. Plot-wise, I get that. It's just my nitpick is just don't refer to it as it looks like a Crossfield class ship, because then my brain immediately goes, that's not anything like Discovery. What are you talking about?
I understood.
Yeah, but no, I mean, being such a nerd, I have looked this up, and the ship is a CGI kit bash made out of the saucer section of the original Crossfield class, the impulse engines from the NX class, like the 01 Enterprise, the warp nacelles of the redone Constitution class from Strange New Worlds, and I think the struts from one of the Strange New World ships as well. So it's a kit bash of like various things. Oh, and the deflector is from like the Pioneer class, almost, the way that it kind of just has its own place on top of the ship, and it's laid out like a Miranda class ship. So yeah, it's a complete Frankenstein of a ship, which makes sense, as you said, for like, we constructed it out of parts in this mine and we're going to launch it. The problem with that, of course, and again, this is uber nerd level, but I'm going to bring it up because it's what I'm here for, is that there's a continuity error, because the exact same ship is docked in Starbase 1 at the start of the episode. Like, it's upside down, which they clearly did to try and think, well, nobody will notice if we do this. But everybody noticed, like, this must just be a regular class that is similar to Crossfield or whatever, because there's another one in the Starbase. And it's now been confirmed it is continuity error because somebody zoomed in and it's got exactly the same registry on the nacelles. Like 12.
Akiva, you thought we wouldn't notice, but we know.
It's such a shame though, because like the visual effects guys do such a good job, and I forget the guy's name, the actual VFX dude, but it's like I understand what you did was to try and beef out this scene by just putting in an asset that you had for later in the episode, but it's a huge continuity error now, and for me there was no need because you already have the Enterprise, the Archer, and the Farragut in that scene. So why throw in a fourth ship? It just feels unnecessary.
And my eyes were on the shuttles docking and coming off of. I just thought that was incredible. So for the average viewer that's maybe slightly a Star Trek nerd, they would have gotten away with it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have noticed if it wasn't for the fact that somebody else pointed it out when I was railing about the fact it wasn't across the field in the first place. But yeah, I mean, I like the design of what they actually came up with in terms of, especially if it was just cobbled together, because it looks pretty cool. So, but anyway,
I think that I would like to go back to Mbenga for just half a moment,
okay.
just to say I really liked the scene where Mbenga gave Spock the lyre. I was
actually about to bring that up. That was my next note.
It's an excellent transition because I have a lot of things to say about Spock in this episode, a whole lot.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that because that brought so much joy to my heart when I saw him have that, because that's one of my favorite things about Spock. Is one of my first memories watching Star Trek was Charlie X, when he was playing alongside Uhura singing. Yes. Charlie's our new darling. You know,
I will say, sorry not to interrupt, but I love the fact that somebody used that as a complete burn against one of the usual suspects was ranging about like Subspace Rhapsody. You would never catch them singing on Kirkship, and somebody just posted the clip of Uhura singing with Spock playing the lute. I was like, touche.
Hey, also. Cracked my knuckles and to jump for joy. Got a clean bill of health from Dr. McCoy. I love Way to Eden as well. That's a great episode. Anyway, yeah. No.
On his wag by his tail. Herbert.
Oh, yeah. I love that one. But also, just the Way to Eden song is actually quite gorgeous. Anyway, getting back on track. The lyre is such a perfect nod to the original series. I love it. Like you said, he stole the Enterprise again, which was just... How many times?
Really?
Yeah, for the first time.
How many times has Spock stolen the Enterprise? Maybe too many.
You let them off when this is the first one, though, because, like I said, this hasn't happened until now. And if anything, the fact that he did it and got away with it would make him think, maybe I'll do it again.
Yeah, very true.
They say his first time being placed in command and his first time taking off with the ship.
About him being in command. I love that they put Spock in command and they gave him an impossible choice at the end of the episode. And that is the perfect experience, a real life Kobayashi Maru, which he somehow got away with, to grow him for command. And I think that's a very important thing to put in because he is a captain in later stories, like in Wrath of Khan, or when he takes command in the Tholian Web, or in the animated series, The Albatross, when everybody gets down with the plague.
Yeah, as you were saying, it's important to his character in TOS, because even though they say he's the science officer and he wears blue, he's the first officer. So he does have to take command a lot. So as you're saying, it's nice that Strange New Worlds is paying respect to that in terms of like, we need to see how he gets to that command level, and has that experience. Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I interrupted your notes there. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. And I have one last thing. Which about Spock? Well, actually, two things. The warp gag is a very funny gag, and it's a great explanation for why in the original series he just goes, "Mr. Sulu put us on a heading for warp factor 7." And
I know some people really hated that scene, and I love it. I think it's so fun.
Yeah, I like it because I think Spock realized in retrospect how cringy that was, and he decided never to do it again. But yeah, the last thing I really want to say about Spock, and I think it's the very core of this episode, is the interaction between the Klingon captain and Spock after he says that he's not able to lie and everything. He says he'll join him for blood wine. He says, "You are no typical Vulcan." He goes, "No, it would seem that I am not." And that is the most important exchange in the whole story, because it points out that if Spock were just like every other Vulcan, he wouldn't have gotten through the situation. Or he would have never even acted upon the urge to steal the Enterprise, putting the Federation and the Klingon Empire back in war. Really,
I mean, that's the thing that I love about Spock in Strange New Worlds, and it's why I hate to keep bringing up the negative, but I've seen one particular person who's like, Strange New Worlds has ruined the character of Spock, and I'm like, are you kidding? It's added so much more depth in showing you how he becomes the Spock you know.
Oh yes.
I don't get the logic of it's ruined him, because I'm like, he's not the Spock from the original series. It's 10 years beforehand. But we already know from the cage that he was a lot less reserved and kind of open with his emotions, laughing at singing plants and things. So, if anything, I love that this show is showing you why he and the conflict that he's going through constantly of like, how am I going to reconcile this with the fact that I'm neither Vulcan nor human? I've got to kind of toe that line of being both. And but also showing you why he would favor the Vulcan side because of things like heartbreak, which we can all
I was
relate
just going to say
on some
that.
level.
Yeah. I think it's showing us why he is the more rational Spock, because we're seeing him kind of stew in his emotions now, and it doesn't most likely probably end well.
Yes,
but I love the complexity of like, at the same time as like I'm trying to contain my emotions and everything again. As you said, it's the same thing of like, well, I have a hunch and I'm going with it. And even Pelia's like a Vulcan with a hunch. This is most unusual, you know. So
speaking of Pelia, Carol Kane is so good, and her chemistry specifically with Ethan Peck is just incredible. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that was hard shoes to feel because we're still feeling the sting of losing our
last boy, am I ever
chief engineer, and this they handled it so well.
I'm still bitter about Hemmer, to be perfectly honest, but you know, at least the actor got to come back and play a singing Klingon for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I also really like that moment at the end where Spock's like, "Is it true you are a Lanthanite?" And she's like, "You Vulcans, you just get very personal after you get drunk."
A few drinks and you get personal, is that
it? Yeah. Also, I loved it. The tiny detail that she came out as a Lanthanite to Amanda.
Spock's
was really sweet. Yeah. There's another character on that planet who I feel like we've completely ignored during this episode, and that is La'an.
I was just about to hit on the one thing that I have about La'an, but go ahead. Yeah.
La'an, in this episode, she has a really wonderful moment to me, and it's when she says she has an antimatter detonation switch.
That was my literal next note as well. In my mind, man. No, go for it.
I thought it was a great moment. I really did. However, when it comes to earlier on in the episode, when she's out drinking the Klingon, I just think to myself, really? Like, you're
fine with it, because at least they made the effort of making it look like she was quite disgusted and struggling to keep it down, you know?
Well, I suppose that's true, but at the same time, I don't.
We've seen worse. I mean, we've seen Cisco drink a barrel of blood wine and tell the Klingons to get out of his way during his disguised as a Klingon mission in season 5.
I suppose that's true. And also, yesterday's Enterprise, what does Worf think is a warrior's drink?
Prune juice.
So clearly the Klingons are not quite as tough as they think they are. You know?
Plus, I loved, it's such a little small line, but I also loved the fact that La'an's cheekily like, and don't be hiding half of the wine in your beard again.
That was great. Yeah.
Get him.
Whoever played that Klingon across from her was really good.
They all were, I thought. Yeah. Definitely. Sorry, Sandra, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
I was just going to say the biggest joke that the entire galaxy played on Klingons is that their blood wine actually is like not all that, and everybody just pretends like it's really represented.
Nobody says anything, but it's actually Ribena.
It's like got the it's got the alcoholic content of schnapps. Like,
it's like a really weak wine.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Anyway, no, I was going to say about La'an, I love the fact that she got to still be a badass, and I like that character and that actress. But I picked up on an original series kind of, not a reference as such, but this is maybe my nerd brain. I love that when she said, you know, Princess Leia style, get out of here, I've got this thermal detonator or whatever, the antimatter thing. And then later on, when they kind of reconvene and they say, whoa, I've never heard of an antimatter mine. What is it? And she's just basically like, oh, you made it up. And I'm like, shades of Kirk making up Corbomite for me in that moment, you know, of the you can't attack the ship or our Corbomite device will blow us up, and there's actually no such thing. I'm like, so it's kind of for me that was a nice very Trek-esque thing to do, you know. So,
and for our security chief, kind of having so many misgivings and kind of weaker character moments last season, it's nice to see her acting so confidently this episode.
So I have no other notes on the writing and the plot in general, but do either of you guys have anything?
I did remember just kind of some of the more strong, poignant moments between Mbenga and Nurse Chapel just there at the very end when they're about to blow themselves out of the ship. And speaking of very deep, platonic, respectful relationships, you know, the way she embraced him as they were about to die together, most likely.
Yeah. I will say on his behalf, because I said I would interject with his thoughts, that DK said the same thing. He said he liked the camaraderie, and in particular, he shouted out the scene where they go, "Oh, we've survived worse than this, have we?" Well, no, not really. Yeah, I get it. I can see where you're coming from with that. That's for sure.
And then a Spock's moment, you know, after that, when you are talking about his Kobayashi Maru moment, and seeing his eyes actually well up with tears, and telling her, you know,
are you gonna be so rough?
CPR, yeah, and just saying, "I waited for you. You do not die." It was just really some really poignant moments for all of those.
That was so well played by Ethan Peck. I could praise him all day, but I love the fact that he played that as like he didn't fully break down because he's still trying to get that Vulcan reserve, but you can see that he's on the edge of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, being on the edge of an emotional breakdown is often far more heartbreaking to watch than actually seeing a breakdown. For instance, like David Tennant in Doctor Who, his last line, like, and it's like, that's just something that I admire when actors are able to do that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that Peck can just do all of this with Spock when he can go to the fully human, like, oh, shocking, you laughed and whatever, but he can also do the, I'm reserved, but I'm fighting against this, you know? And I love that, again, it's a little thing, but I do like when Star Trek explains the thing that a lot of non-fans don't get, which they do in this episode, which is, no, Vulcans do have emotions. They actually have emotions stronger than us. They just have things that block them. So, because a lot of non-fans just tend to take it as like, oh, the species without emotions. And the nerd in me always has to bite my lip and be like,
I know. Oh, that's so hard for me to not just like, well, actually, you know, but one thing I would also like to say, speaking of the acting, is, and I do not know the actor's name, and I feel terrible about it, but the actor who plays Robert April is incredible.
Adrian something, but I can't remember what his surname is, bless him.
Well, it's Adrian Holmes.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Adrian Holmes is incredible, and I would not want to be on the end of Robert April's wrath. Like, seeing how he chastised Spock after everything that happened in that episode, I was like,
he's great. Yeah.
I like that April is an admiral who's more of a big picture admiral, because so many times we come across these admirals that are so narrow-minded and stupid. And clearly he's, you know, I mean, he could have court-martialed Spock. You know, he could have really come down on them a lot more harder than he did. However, big picture, you know, we've got this.
It was, even then there was something. There was something great about the way that he does it to Spock, because he doesn't just go like, oh, well, I'll let you off this time. There's something both amusing and clever about the way that he goes, consider that Klingon hangover your punishment. And I'm like, okay. So you're not like, I'm forgiving you. You're just like, yo, you're in pain. Good.
Exactly. Yeah. And he doesn't come off as a pushover or easy. He comes off as somebody who's discerning and somebody who's is an incredible presence. I really like that.
I will say, as regards to that plot, though, I'm kind of annoyed, although this happens on Trek almost every time they do this, of the fact that Starfleet were completely in the wrong and Spock was very right. Like, if Spock hadn't went, they'd currently be fighting a war against the Klingons. So, I kind of, part of me resents whenever the officer that does the kind of mutiny doesn't just go, seems like I did the right thing, though, doesn't it? You know?
It's unspoken, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah.
I have one last note, or two last notes. One being, I loved that shot, the cinematography of Spock cradling his lyre at the end in his quarters while the ship was in warp. That was just such a nice shot. I really liked that shot. And the last thing, dedicated to Nichelle Nichols. I thought that was perfect.
I can't bring that up. That breaks my heart, man.
It's very sad that she's gone. But also a part of me thinks these dedications, they always come right after the actor has died, which I think is a good and respectful thing to do. But do you guys think it would have been better had they waited for the Uhura-centric episode this season, the one where the deuterium was communicating with her, to put that dedication for Nichelle?
Maybe personally, I don't.
Yeah, personally, I don't, because I like the idea of like it happened when they were on hiatus. So this is the first chance they had to pay their
I
respect.
understand, yeah.
And because for me, I think Uhura actually does have a decent plot and a decent amount to do in this episode. She doesn't do nothing. And I like the things that she does do. I like the way that it literally starts with her going, yo, don't come near this. This is my console. If you want to be at it, give me time. I'm going to lock it down.
Oh,
you go over there.
I completely forgot about the inspection. And
exactly.
That was fun.
So I love that. And I love that, like I said, off screen, she's promoted to ensign, which is quite a cool thing anyway, as we get closer to the lieutenant.
You're right.
And as you said, the fact that when I think it's whoever goes on the away mission, Spock or whatever, casually refers to her as ensign, and La'an starts talking and then goes, wait a minute, what, ensign? And Uhura's just like, we go away, you miss stuff.
Even Ortega's got some neat little character moments in this. They really did well as far as including everybody.
Ortega's is fantastic. Ortega's is always underserved, but every time you give her one sentence like pedal to the metal or I was personally workshopping vamoose. It's just like, I want to see that now.
I think Ortega's is probably my favorite of the new characters which have been added in. She is wonderful.
When they're all in Spock's quarters and he's telling them, we're going to steal the Enterprise, and everybody's like, all right. And she's like, oh, like she just now got it. It's so funny.
Yes, I love that.
But even then, again, related to what you guys were saying, and this is an example for me of how they use the backstory well, is when they're sort of hiding in the lair and Spock's nervous, understandably, and Ortega's is just like, look, I've hid from enough Klingons during the war to know when you can take a breather. And I'm like, ooh, one line and you get everything you need to know right there. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
That's economical storytelling. Brilliant. But yeah, anyway, enough. But yeah, so I was going to talk about the acting next because we kind of basically have started. So effectively, we've all said Ethan Peck, fantastic. I mentioned already Celia Rose Gooding as Uhura. We said, Ortegas, whose actor name I do know, and I'm completely blanking on it again. Melissa Navia, there we go, is also very good. And obviously, Carol Kane, absolute legend. And from the moment she appears, she just elevates stuff. I mean, movies, Broadway, whatever else. She's so good of an actress. And seeing her in Star Trek was a thrill, even though apparently she's not a fan of sci-fi generally. So, but I just loved it. I have to say, shout out to her.
So sweet and quirky. I almost said Kirky. That's funny.
That's
I found his
Paul
name.
Wesley is Kirky.
I found his name. Kardokh, the Klingon who has the drinking contest with La'an. It's played by a guy named Kyle Cass, and he was fantastic. I really
from Tenacious D.
No, Cass with a K.
Okay. That would be a heck of a revelation. No, that's cool. Yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
The Klingons were very well done in this episode, I think.
Again, I don't have the names in front of me, but I actually really liked the female Klingon who was quite intimidating. That she came up, brushed up against La'an, and it turned out she, I think, was a member of the Broken Circle in the end.
And she didn't overplay the character either.
And the only other note I have on the acting, which again, Sandra, you'll appreciate, is just the sexual chemistry between Jess Bush and Ethan Peck is off the charts. You couldn't have predicted that when you cast the two of them. And yet you kind of have to play that Spock Chapel thing, but then you cast them. It is a gift. You have that level of like, oh boy, it seems like every time they talk, those two are about to jump into bed. You know what I mean? So,
even when Nurse Chapel just walks in the room in the beginning of the episode, and his heart rate immediately goes up, but you felt it beyond that, explanation in the background.
Yeah, but even though Mbenga rather callous, charismatically was like, strange. It seems like he's like, don't even say it. Shush.
I love that Mbenga keeps poking at it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. You would, though, wouldn't you? You would tease a little bit. Yeah, you got to have a little bit of that. So anyway, do you guys have any other notes on the acting then before I move us slightly along?
Well, all of the acting is phenomenal in this show.
Right.
That's probably the thing I've taken away from Strange New Worlds more than anything else, is that the caliber of actors that they were able to get for the show is just unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I'm so glad that it is the way it is. It's amazing.
Yeah, in fact, it's what makes it so easy for me to jump on board, where I can confidently say this show can do no wrong. Every time I watch an episode, I am all in on it. Just really, and it's because of that acting. You're right.
That's cool. I will say, because you have kind of touched on it, but I will say even in one scene as well, we have to shout out Anson Mount and Rebecca Romaine. One scene and they're both just amazing in it. That's all you get.
Very good. Very good, both of them, yes.
And good on them for giving us a very plausible explanation as to why, they're not present for these
completely
episodes. Very plausible. Completely. Super well done.
As I said, given that Spock's my favorite character in like all of Trek, I didn't mind anyway, because I was like, yeah, give him a chance to be in command and be the lead of the show for a second, So yeah, awesome. So then, just about the direction, do you guys have anything that you wanted to bring up? I have like 3 random notes that I made, but I'll come to you guys first.
I don't really have anything about the direction, so go ahead.
Well, I just said I like that there are some gorgeous sweeping shots of the planet that we visit. The actual, I can't remember the name of it, Kajitar or whatever. It looks amazing, and they take their time to actually build it up and show you it, because we don't live in the age of like studios and matte paintings, so it looks fantastic. And the same when they actually go down into the cave, the mine where the ship is. It's really impressively, I assume CGI, because I doubt they would have actually went down a huge cave or whatever. But for me, it was seamless. It looked amazing. And on the negative side, as I've already mentioned, didn't love the strobe lighting effect on the combat scenes that the director felt was necessary. For me, it was just overkill and very much like, all right, we get it. We're 2 steps away from putting on German techno music on the scene here. But, yeah. So, any other notes from you, Sandra, about direction?
No.
Cool. So on the special effects, I've already basically just said. The only thing I want to mention is, the Klingons. It's good to see the more familiar looking ones, even though I don't, rail against Discoveries. I do like that they're back to normal. And I so love the gorgeous new D7 design. I'm sorry if you're a purist and you like the old one too much, but that Klingon ship is just so sexy. Come on, man. When that warped into the system, I was just like, oh.
The majority of the designs in Strange New Worlds are a perfect marriage of the modernistic look of spaceships and that beautiful retro design that they have in the original series.
100%. And I mentioned it on, I think, a previous episode with Adrienne. Some people had issue with this. I love the fact that the warp nacelles basically retract to form guns, because that was the one thing you never understood about, like, they're Klingons. Of course they're going to have disruptors somewhere on the ship, So when they did that and they kind of, like, the thing slid away to reveal the big guns on the end of their wings, I was like, of course, this is awesome. So, yeah. Awesome. So, yeah, just to summarize then, because I've got nothing else really except to say, what I'm going to start doing is to kind of summarize hits and misses for me, and maybe just generally get you guys input and agree or disagree. So I will say the hits of this episode, obviously Ethan Peck, Carol Kane, Celia Rose Gooding, every other actor, basically, we've already said. Proper Klingons and their cool ship. For me, the visual effects of the battle scenes, the chase through the various sort of ice crystals, and the opening shots of Starbase One were also just gorgeous. And of course, Pelia joining the crew and her entire kind of storyline. The idea that she's almost immortal, so she's just bored, which I think is such a brilliant angle to come at from that. So yeah, we all in agreement with that in terms of hits?
Hard agree.
Yes, very big agree. But so the characterization of Spock is a big hit for me in this one.
Yes,
huge hit.
Yeah, I think Spock is basically the focus of the episode, as it turns out. Yeah, goes without saying, but just to emphasize it, that if that hadn't worked, that would have been a much weaker episode. So awesome. For me, I'm going to say the misses. I didn't like the Mbenga Chapel plot, but we've kind of touched on that. I don't know if we would say it's a miss because you guys didn't mind and liked some parts of it. So we'll keep that floating, I think, just randomly. For me, it's a miss, but for not everybody. I hate the Gorn on Strange New Worlds. So the tease of the Gorn at the end for me felt like a wet fart, because I was like, oh God, these guys again. But we haven't touched on that, so I'm not sure if you guys would agree or disagree.
We touched on a previous episode, and I had said the new Gorn were a hit, but I just don't think this is, just they're coming in on a ship. So I don't think the Gorn we saw were necessarily the only iteration of this species. So I'm excited to see what's coming.
Yeah, it seemed like the end of the season was leaning towards, these alien xenomorphs can't possibly be the thing in a rubber suit that Kirk was fighting. So maybe
who knows? Maybe once they get real old, they'll look like that. They just kind of atrophy and turn into rubbery looking things. Like, they could find a way. They'll find a way.
That's fair enough. And the only other thing I had an issue with was stuff. This is really nitpicking because I was kind of looking for for things, and so that it wasn't just a section of the no misses. But I would say I didn't like the lack of Pike and Una, but at the same time I did, because it gives Spock a chance to shine. I just like those actors and characters. But again, that's not so much a miss as kind of, I guess, just down the middle, because I did think
strange new worlds, even your misses are hits. Anyway,
effectively, yeah. I did think upon first watching the episode that Spock got off a little too lightly, but then as I watched it back for the second time, I was like, in fairness, though, Starfleet were fully in the wrong. He was right, and he doesn't get off that lightly, because, as I said, the way Admiral April is effectively like, oh, dude, experience that hangover, that is punishment. So,
and he also said, if you do that again, it's over.
It's your commission. Yeah.
Which is,
yeah. Even though we know for a fact that's not the case when it happens again. But
yeah, that's true.
So, I haven't actually mentioned this to Jeremy, but the next thing that we go on to is to give our favorite character moment and line of the episode.
Great.
So, to give you a chance to think, I will give Sandra, you're used to this, so I'll come to you first, then give mine, and then we'll come to Jeremy, because, again, I should really have mentioned it in advance. So we'll start with, who was your favorite character in the episode, Sandra?
I've got to go with Spock. So much development for him, and really, really just love that character.
Yeah, my favorite character was also Spock, ironically, for all the reasons that we've already touched on, the development, the way that it pays respect to Leonard Nimoy while adding depth to that version of the character, who is, as I said, my favorite Star Trek character. Again, I know people have problems with it. I'm sorry if that's you. I just don't. I like it. So for me, yeah, Spock, and the fact he got so much to do and so much development. What about you, Jeremy?
Spock, for sure. Spock.
3 for 3 for Spock there. I had a feeling that might happen, but, you know, just fair enough. So what is your favorite, let's see, moment in the episode, Sandra?
My favorite moment was just the Chapel and Mbenga mowing down Klingons. And like I had said, that very first scene where that scene begins, and they just kind of drop down into the lower deck, but the camera just kind of does this flip thing, and it just kind of set the mood for the moment that they were about to be very badass, and I just really liked it. And like Jeremy had mentioned, it wasn't necessarily, even with that stuff on board, it wasn't even easy for them. Even at one point, Nurse Chapel was, captured by 2 Klingons, but then she sees Mbenga going for it, and she pulls out her last ounces of strength to free herself and take down those last 2. So I just really like that scene.
I forgot to mention as well in that scene, it's a little moment, but I also love that Chapel seems to be the only one that uses his first name, so that when she's trying to talk him down, she shouts like Joseph, and you never hear his first name. Everyone else just refers to him as Dr. Mbenga. So I was like, oh, okay. It again speaks to their relationship with each other. But anyway,
yes.
My favorite moment was, sorry to be very basic, the chase through the kind of ice crystals and things in space to chase down the false Federation ship. Partly because it's just cool and exciting and the visuals look good, but also because of what it meant for the tension of Spock as a character. Because I was like in his shoes at that time of like, it did show it, but you could feel his like knuckles gripping the chair of like, not yet. What am I going to do? I was told to fire on this ship, but Chapel's on it. But if we don't, the Klingons are just there. Oh, what are we going to do? And all that coupled with a really cool kind of visual effect and everything really brought me into that moment. So I
Ortega's turn and burn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%, yeah. So that was mine. What about you, Jeremy?
My favorite moment was, as I said before, the you are not a typical Vulcan. No, it appears that I am not. Because that sums up the entire core of this episode.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a different line wonderful moment.
That's fair enough. Awesome. That makes sense, yeah. What about, so we'll go to favorite line then. So Sandra, what was your favorite line in the episode?
My favorite line was one, when they were right before that moment, when they saw the ship burst out of the atmosphere of the planet and realized it was an Enterprise ship, and then Mbenga says he can send a very basic signal, and you're thinking, what is he going to send? Surely, we're in here, or beam us out, but instead it was Enterprise, destroy this ship. Yeah, and it was just so jarring, and I was like, oh man, you could see the turn that this was taking, and that they were willing to die to not restart this war again. It was that important to them.
I did think that was clever, because I always like it when it doesn't give you the easy options, because it would have been easy to write in like we could got something where we can just immediately communicate with you and tell you everything. But the fact that it was like, no, it's a transponder. It can transmit the ship's registry and class, and that's basically it. And he's like, but I can modify it for like Morse code if you want. And yeah,
Morse
I love
2.
that.
What's that?
Morse 2. Well, presumably it's a future variant that they're going to come to at some point by the 24th, 3rd century. So awesome. Yeah. So my favorite line, I'm going to come to you first, Jeremy, because I have like a list, because I hate myself when I do this, but I had to give like 3 or 4 honorable mentions. Then my favorite line. So Jeremy, what was your favorite line in the episode?
I think my favorite line in the episode had to be, and I know this is so simple, but just, "You do not die." It was just so, the way it was delivered was just perfect. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I have to rewatch that. But didn't he before, it was like they were flashing between his Vulcan and human side, because he did conjugate the first time he said it. I think he said, "You don't die." And then he said, "You do not die."
Exactly. Yeah. I loved that.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. It was really good. The way that was filmed as well was really good, because it seemed like they did the thing they almost never do, which is to put you in the POV of the person being beamed. So you could kind of see the chaoticness of and hecticness of like, we're in space, we're effed. Wait a minute, transporter beam, or inside the ship. Thank goodness. So yeah, again, very much there. Great work from the director on that one. So my favorite line then, I'll give you the ones that almost made it first, which were when Mbenga and Spock are discussing emotions, and Mbenga just says, "You'll just have to learn to live with them, like we all do." Oh yeah, we've been there. When Mbenga, as Spock kind of his heart rate accelerates and he leaves, Mbenga says, fascinating. And Chapel replies, "Isn't that supposed to be his line?"
Yeah.
For a Trekkie is just gold. This is more to do with Carol Kane's delivery, I think, but it's the way that she delivers. I'm not implying anything. I'm flat out saying that you've broken several Starfleet regulations. You're trying to steal the Enterprise, unless you're going to tell me this isn't what you do. Yeah, 17. You would remember, wouldn't you?
I like numbers.
Fair enough. But the actual winner for me, because it brings a tear to my eye, was the exchange at the very end. And again, it relates to what you were saying about the heart of the episode, Jeremy, which is between Spock and Pelia. When Pelia says, "You want to know the worst thing about living almost forever?" Spock, "The loss of those you love." Pelia, "Oh, you sweet un-Vulcan Vulcan. No, that's the pain shared by all those who live with even a half-open heart. No, it's boredom. And on that ship of yours, there seems to be a shortage of that. I like it. I might even try to stick around." That is such...
And she didn't even say it's boredom. She said it's boredom.
Boredom. Yeah, exactly.
She was very animated.
Before we hit our conclusion and score, I'm going to jump over to the audience interaction then and get the few audience responses to this. I promise we won't be much longer, guys. Sorry to keep you, but yeah. So first of all, I do have to open the section by saying I'm going to call this Subspace Communications, I believe is the section name.
Incoming transmission.
I'm going to begin with DK's thoughts, because he wasn't able to make it, but he did send me quickly his initial very brief notes. He says, "I'm not going to give a score because it's not fair, but my favorite character was Spock. My favorite scene was," so that's another one for Spock. "My favorite scene was Mbenga and Chapel. We've been in worse situations than this." And his favorite line was literally exactly the same as mine that I just read out. So yeah, that was DK's thoughts on this. So he probably would have agreed, I think, with a lot of what you guys are saying. It's a shame he couldn't make it, but yeah, hopefully he's feeling better, because it sounded rough what he was going through. Just going to the other things then. From Mastodon, Christopher Page says, "I was fairly cool on season 2 overall. The opener set the pace for me. I was glad to see more recognizable Klingons, but the story felt so rushed. This felt more like something that would have been a season arc in another series. I'm getting tired with every character being made a badass. Mbenga having some more experience is fine. Making him and Chapel a 2-member commando team maybe is a step too far." Okay. Ben Rothig, again on Mastodon, says, "Yeah, the whole Mbenga Chapel part almost took me out of the episode, as did the ship. Thank you, Ben. Nerds unite." And then Ben also said, "I think the fact nominal support characters have a combat-related storyline is fine." Okay. Dex, DAKKZZ, says, "I have no problem with that. It's early days. We don't know any of the new storylines, and the characters will pan out." Okay. Over on Twitter, or X, or whatever they're calling it these days, Robin Brownfield says, "The only criticism I have of the episode was the fight scenes with Mbenga, Chapel, and the Klingons went in a little too long. Ethan Peck isn't Leonard Nimoy, but he's really stepped up to the plate as Spock. His performance in this episode was very impressive." And I have a couple from DK's friends. So this is from our friend Nick, who you've heard on the Silver Screen podcast, who just says, "Disobeying direct commands, breaking the rules, stealing the Enterprise, sure feels like Star Trek to me." And our friend Angela, who again has been on one of those episodes, just said, I absolutely love the new character, Commander Pellier, my kind of sarcastic attitude. If you're going to steal a starship, do it correctly. I hope I have her level of sass and sense of adventure when I'm in my 60s, never mind however old she is. It's interesting getting to learn some of Chapel and Mbenga's backstory from the war, although their adherence to the Hippocratic Oath seems somewhat flexible. Them hiding the Enterprise as space junk, where have I seen that before? The Syndicate's false flag operation is very poignant, and it's nice to see the Vulcan lute harp thingy make a reappearance. And then she just says, and then attribute to Nichelle and crying face, which I think we can all relate to. So that's it from the audience then. So we have to just finish up the episode, this podcast, with our own conclusions and score out of 5 Starfleet Deltas. So, again, Jeremy, I wouldn't put you on the spot and come first because this is probably news to you that you have to do this.
No,
so
but I kind of figured it was going to... I can go first if you'd like.
Okay, well, if you'd like, yeah, as the guest, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I give it 3 out of 5 Deltas. Because even though I really liked it, there are far better episodes of this show. And I'm just thinking in the perspective of this compared to other episodes of Strange New Worlds. Although this was a very competent, very strong episode, there are episodes which are much more visceral in the emotions that they're able to bring out. And episodes which, I mean, it was excellent to have a Spock-related episode. But my entire thoughts when watching the first episode was, this is all well and good, but can't we get to the stuff with Una? That was those are my thoughts. And I think that's an element that we need to remember, is that they just kind of left that plot thread dangling for a week. And I understand why they did it. But at the same time, it did affect my enjoyment of the episode. And there were a few moments where I just thought, yeah, this is Star Trek, but it didn't feel like it was breaking much new ground. But I did like it. I liked it a lot.
So you said 3 out of 5. That's fair enough. Sandra, what about you? Do you have a conclusion and your score out of 5?
You know, my only gripe with this entire episode would be how quickly that Klingon folded when he was being questioned by Mbenga. But then again, he did have very weak forehead ridges. I give the...
Also, Mbenga was currently all full-on Captain America, so he probably would have broken his arm or something.
But aside from that, I give it a 4.5. I mean, my thoughts throughout the whole episode were, you know, they've done it again. I just loved the entire episode.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. I apologize that, again, my conclusion will be the longest, most long-winded. I try to keep them short, but then I just end up hitting review mode, and it sounds like a little pompous maybe, but let's hopefully it makes sense and gathers my thoughts together. I just said I get some very classic Star Trek vibes from this episode. At times, it put me in mind of watching the original series or the first 6 movies. Ethan Peck continues to impress me with his performance as Spock, respecting and adding depth to my favourite character in all of Trek. Carol Kane is the best thing to happen to Star Trek in years, a bona fide legend whose presence elevates every scene she's in, or maybe I'm just a fan. The makeup and various special effects continue to impress me as well, feeling both recognisably Trek-like but subtly updated for the year that we're in. As a ship nerd, the whole Crossfield class thing confused and annoyed me. I still don't get why that dialogue was included or not clearer. I also thought the episode began to sag in the middle and struggled a little bit to hold its focus and hold my attention. The Mbenga storyline was simply all kinds of bad. It came out of nowhere after not being mentioned last season. It jars tonally with the series it's in, and thanks to the magic strength potion, it's also pretty dumb as well as dark and a bit cruel for me. It doesn't help that with the season over, I know where it's going, and based on this episode, I will say the jury was probably still out. All in all, definitely more positive than negative. A great start to the season and a good feeling for the most part of returning to my old Trek friends' comfort blanket. And I give it 4 out of 5 Starfleet Deltas as well. So putting that together to work out the average then, the final score for this episode comes to 3.83 recurring. So we'll just round it and call it 3.8 out of 5. So pretty good. I mean, not a bad episode at all, and not a bad score. So awesome. Right, that concludes our business for here today then. It's probably about time we got going. So again, apologies for keeping you guys longer. I could have probably stayed even longer and chatted all things Trek because I usually can. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us for the first time, Jeremy. Have you had fun?
I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Anytime. We'll have to have you back because honestly, I could honestly have chatted to you for hours about your thoughts on the various Trek things. Even when I don't agree, your thoughts and feelings are genuinely well put together and nice to listen to. So
thank you.
Awesome. So do you have anywhere that you can shout out that people can find you on the internet apart from this episode?
I have a YouTube channel. I mean, I don't do a lot of Star Trek stuff. I love Star Trek, but my main focus is Doctor Who. So if you like that, yeah, but also I like to sing on there and do all sorts of silly things. The thing about my channel is I don't really have a consistent thing that I do. It's just whenever I'm feeling adventurous, I'll do something, and most every one of my videos is different from the other. Like I never repeat something. And so that's probably why I don't have a massive amount of subscribers, because they don't know what to expect from me and don't know why they should subscribe, which is okay. I just like putting it out there in the world.
You might get some Star Trek fans jumping over there now. So
maybe. But also, I have a Twitter, I guess.
You have an X.
An X, I think. At Jeremy K. Duncan 1.
Unless you're listening to this in a few weeks, in which case that's probably folded by now.
Oh, for sure. But yeah. But it was really nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. No, thanks for being a great guest. And on a similar note, thank you for stepping up to the co-hosting plate, Sandra, for me, with DK being absent.
I could not quite fill his shoes, but yes, it was fun to help out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for letting us ramble on and for giving your thoughts as well on the episode. And I know I ask this every time, but do you have anywhere people can find you, or is it just our Discord as usual?
Just your Discord as usual.
Fair enough. And you can find all the links to myself, DK, and the podcasts in the episode description. As I always say, do keep on joining us here, because we're back for the next few weeks to conclude our Klingon-themed season. So we will be returning next week. DK will again be sitting that one out, but that was scheduled, so don't worry. And we're going to be looking at the Discovery opening episodes, The Vulcan Hello and Battle at the Binary Stars. So enjoy that. And we do still have ongoing things on our sister podcast, Silver Screen Podcast. We just came out with a review of Power Rangers 2017, which is doing surprisingly well. That was entirely my passion project, which I expected to get about 5 views, and it's rocketed to about 250 odd so far. So you can still catch that and various other film reviews and things over there, including some upcoming ones that DK is doing on cult films. I think he's got The Black Hole coming up. Big Trouble in Little China should probably be up by the time you hear this. And lots of good things coming. Tune to both the channels, and thanks again to my guests for joining me. It's been a fantastic one, even if it's been a bit long. And do remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper. Or Kapla.
Live long and prosper.
Kapla!
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Created, produced, and edited by Michael Wilson. Additional material produced by DK. Music by Timeless Journey. More information can be found at soundcloud.com/Timeless Journey. The Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast is based on an idea by Michael Wilson and Will Templar. Follow the podcast on Instagram at HoM Star Trek Podcast, or look for the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast under Facebook groups. Links to all our social media accounts and more are in this episode's description. This podcast is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just look for Silver Screen Hit or Miss Star Trek. This has been a Mike's Podcast production, copyright 2022. Thank you for listening.